Record. We are live on Las Vegas Triathlon Club Facebook page, and we're recording. It's Friday, Valentine's Day weekend.
Yes, Valentine's Day weekend. We finally made it.
Yeah, goodness.
So,
what are you doing for Valentine's Day weekend?
Well, I'm going to do the time trial duathlon tomorrow. That's actually tomorrow. I'm going to do mine. I opened it up for everybody for Saturday or Sunday since Sunday
nice.
was so crummy. We talked about, being safe and practicing riding in the wind, but I'm gonna get out there tomorrow. Actually, I'm gonna go for a swim first.
Yeah. And
make it a triathlon.
Okay, nice.
Self-imposed triathlon.
Where are you swimming?
So Garside Pool, our masters team is training there tomorrow morning. We normally train at Palo Verde, but they redid the pool. I don't know if you knew that over like the last 4 months, and something went wrong with when they put the blocks in, and so they have to redo something or other. So we're back outside for the next 2 weeks.
Okay. So
do a little swim and then drive up to West Tech, and then ride out, and then ride back as fast as I can, and then run as fast as I can.
That's a good day.
Yep, and that's a good day. And
we'll come out that way. We'll bring the bikes out from this side of town, and Laura's going to do it too. And
yeah, are you going to do it tomorrow?
I think so. I haven't looked at the wind. I saw a wind advisory.
Tomorrow before 11 looks good.
Okay. Which way is it blowing?
The good way.
Oh, nice. All right.
Might be able to
warm up into the wind and
exactly. The funny thing is there though, like it swirls so much.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I've been times out there where it's like, okay, I'm gonna get a great tailwind, and you turn around and it switches on you. So you truly never know out there. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. Like for me, because this is training, like I'm more concerned about my wattage than the time, to be honest with you.
Right.
I've been doing a lot of FTP work lately, and it's kind of want to see where I'm at, and so that'll be good. And so then what do you got planned for Sunday for actual Valentine's Day? Is it top secret? Don't share.
Yes, top secret. That's right.
Yeah. Whatever I get it. My wife watches this she usually watches this a couple times after we're finished, so I don't want to say what I'm doing either. Yeah. But it'll probably be a long Zwift ride.
Yeah, right. It's so top secret, I'm not even sure what we're doing yet. So.
and then we get a bonus day because it's Monday's a holiday.
That's right.
So that's
right.
So that's good. Hey, did you see the thing? I know you don't follow along too much, but they're starting a Zwift Duathlon League on.
Really?
On this Wednesday. It looks pretty fun. I usually race on Zwift on Tuesday nights. Mm-hmm. Like, could I go back to back?
Yeah, right.
So it's you ride for 35 minutes, and then they measure the distance you go. Every 5 meters is 1 point.
Yeah. Then
you get 10 minutes to get onto a treadmill. Then you run for 15 minutes, and every 1 meter is a point. And it's gonna be broken down by age groups, and it's a 6-week series.
Interesting. So this whole Zwift, this is going to change our research. Yes. Because oddly enough, a lot of times we do a test protocol where we tell someone to bike as hard as they can for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes and see how far they can go. And one of the limitations of that is that people don't race that way. They typically race for distance. How fast can I cover a distance?
Yeah.
But now we're going to have all these experienced people who know how to race for time, which is very different. It's not the same.
It's so interesting, the more I've been Zwift racing and then using like the WKO software, like I can now, like if I'm riding, I can tell if I've got on Zwift in particular, I know the climb is going to be 2 minutes, and that's where the race is going to be won or lost.
Yeah, right.
In the modeling now, it's kind of like best bike splits. I can say so I don't get dropped, I need to do 450 watts for those 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And physiologically, can I do it or not?
Yeah, right.
And it's really interesting. I think you're right. I think people are learning that. Because historically you're right. Like if you just said do, 30 minutes all out, how does someone pace that?
Yeah, right.
Right. Unless you traditionally are racing 10, 10-mile time trials. You wouldn't know. And I think that was a big limitation in doing that kind of studies.
No, and funny, actually, I've got my commitment day. Actually, this is the 5K shirt, but Lifetime does the indoor tri every year, and that's by time. And you swim for 10 minutes as far as you can, bike for 30 minutes, I think it is. Yeah, and then how far you can run in 20 minutes. And so, it's a different approach.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll probably go for a swim on Sunday.
Yep.
And do you know, I've been swimming since the 70s. I've never had a shoulder injury.
I've been swimming since the 70s as well, just so you know. But so the start was in 1976 at the YWCA in Calgary.
Nice.
My mom and dad put me in swim lessons, and I hid out in the bathroom because I hated it. So I've been swimming that long too, just, not like you.
That's awesome. That's cool.
I unfortunately was, other than that, was a relatively late to swimming, and I've struggled with shoulder issues.
That's interesting.
And so my limiter right now, and probably for the last 3 or 4 years, and swimming has not been the desire to swim. It's been the health of my shoulder.
Interesting.
And so it's it's frustrating, right? Because, I'm an athletic trainer. I teach athletic training. I teach shoulder stuff. I teach, scapular mechanics. I teach humeral mechanics. I do everything I'm supposed to do to make my shoulders feel better, and still struggle. But that being said, because of that, I've become a student of swimming shoulders. And believe it or not, and I've said this to myself many times, so I think I've finally figured out what my problem was. And so this was funny. This was about 3 weeks ago. I finally figured it out. But I had to kind of let my shoulder kind of calm down and do some rehab stuff. Then I got the COVID vaccine on Monday. Yeah. And so I went swimming last night, and then I'm like, oh man, is that my shoulder or my shoulder? Is that where they right? Because it was pretty sore. But that being said, when you look at the research, there is a high number of people that have shoulder issues that are swimmers.
Yeah, I mean, the epidemiology, the swimming injury research, it's clearly the shoulder is the number one injury. But unless you start going stroke specific, then you can have some lower extremity problems, especially with breaststroke.
Yeah.
But
in the triathlon world, you're gonna see the shoulder, right?
It's in the triathlon world, it's going to be shoulder because we are all primarily swimming cross stroke, which we often will say freestyle, but freestyle is an event, and in that event, you can swim any stroke.
Exactly.
Most people will swim cross stroke, and that's why we often use freestyle and cross stroke to mean the same thing, but they're technically not.
Yeah. No, it's true. And then, I was trying to look through some of the epidemiology, and there's very little on late onset swimmers, like late in life onset swimmers. Most of it, like everything, is collegiate.
Yeah. And actually, there's some really good work on shoulder impingement injury mechanisms by Jim Hay back in, gosh, I think it was the 80s.
Yeah.
And that was one of the limitations of that work. It was great work. And he identified, 3 real main areas for, hopefully I can remember them, 3 real main areas for shoulder impingement. But one of the criticisms, not criticism, but one of the limitations of the study is that they were all with elite swimmers, not, adult onset swimmers, people who take up the sport later in life. And that population may actually be a different risk level than collegiate swimmers.
Well, and I actually think there's 2 different risk levels here. I think if you were a collegiate swimmer and then still kept swimming like into your 40s, 50s, and 60s, I think you still have this, you still have injury, but I think I think that the pathology and the pathomechanics might be significantly different than someone like myself who was a runner and then takes up swimming. I think that I think we're looking at two different types of humans.
Yeah, true. Right. Well, but I'll also add that the recommendations for how to swim, the technique
Yeah.
has changed pretty dramatically so over the period that I've been swimming.
Yeah.
And what we see now for, okay, here's how you should swim is quite different than, back when I was swimming in high school. So it is interesting to see that evolution. And in triathlon, there's a whole nother level of technique because of you're wearing a wetsuit, because of the open water nature of having to lift your head to see where you're going, and dealing with waves. We've talked about that in some of the other podcasts. It's not the glimmer glass pool that you're dealing with lane lines telling you which way to go, or keeping you from drifting off in one direction or the other.
Yeah, and where you could focus on like actually looking at your hand.
Yeah, right. Or maybe you can't even see it.
Maybe you can't.
Tempe Lake.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a lot of places like that you can't see. And yeah, no, I agree with you. And there is definitely, if there's any young researchers out there that want to take this on as a project, I think it would be an interesting project to look at late onset swimmers, especially coming from other sports. I ran into a few swim coaches along the way. They said they could always tell I was a runner,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just by the way I moved in the water. Right. But the funny thing is I could always tell the swimmers when they're running.
Yeah. Right.
We have these idiosyncrasies that are just kind of pre-programmed.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it's a real, it's a real thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And having gone through it for the last 12 years and trying to overcome my limitations in the pool, it's been very frustrating. Because the harder I worked never seemed to equal, the results I was trying to get, and or the harder I worked, the more injured I got.
Yeah, right. Well, water is 800 times more dense than air, and you're moving your hand in the water, and any direction you move your hand, you're coming up against resistance forces.
Yep.
And so it is a very unique media to be moving in. And that's why I do think a lot more time is spent on technique than you would see for running or cycling. Although I know we both believe you have to work on your technique for both running and cycling. Yep. Swimming is probably, much higher rate of working on technique in any given workout than we would do for running or biking.
Yeah, but the thing is I think once you have decent technique,
mm-hmm.
And what I mean by decent technique is, well, I guess in any of the sports, right? I think that we still do need to put in the volume and do it appropriately, right?
Yeah, right. So maybe I'll throw this out for definition for good technique. It's not painful.
There you go.
All right. So what number one is, if you're swimming and there's any pain, something's wrong. Because you should not be having pain while you're swimming. Just like, you shouldn't be having pain when you're biking or running. If you did, you'd stop and change something, or change your cleat, or you change your shoes, or what have you. So swimming technique, don't.
Yeah, no, that's my number one takeaway. Like I get out of the pool sometimes and it's almost embarrassing because I swim with a swim group and we have a coach, and it's like I've done 1,500 and I get out and everyone else is going to do like 4,000.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get out, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I was, running, I could just walk home and nobody would know, right? I think there's an ego, especially if you swim with a swim group, there's an ego associated with it. And even that, like there's a set up on the board, for example, and it's like, you got to do this, then this, then this, and this. And as triathletes, we're notorious. We're like, I got to complete the workout.
Got to do it.
I got to do it. And so this January / into February, as I'm really trying to reinvent my swim stroke to fix this problem I'm having, I've just told myself, it's like my goal today is 2,000. If it starts to hurt at 1,500, I'm getting out.
Yep.
And and then when I get out, then do some activities that I know or I hope are going to help. but it's hard. It's really hard. You know, when I look at my, you know, my training peaks, my swim TSS, and
Yep.
how poor it is, and you know, but then again, this is the time to do it, right? We got, who knows if we're going to race.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to. I think it's looking pretty good.
I think St. George is looking really good.
Yeah, I think I've got my hope set that we're gonna have some races this year. But let's tap into your clinical expertise on injuries.
Yep.
So tell me about a little bit more about maybe the injury mechanisms, or what kind of injuries you want to start with.
Let me share my screen. I'm going to show some
Oh
of
yeah,
that.
sorry.
I think honestly, talking about it and we can talk our way through it as we do this.
Yeah, because we probably need to get some terminology out of the way.
Yeah. So here is my 3D anatomy app. Okay. So here's a shoulder, obviously. And with this, we can start to, this is a fun little app because we can take layers away.
Nice.
What we want to really do is now look deep into the shoulder. Okay. So I'm going to zoom us in a little bit here. So when we talk about swimmer shoulder, most of the time we're talking about something called shoulder impingement. And there are several different things that can become impinged in the shoulder. And it's a good term, but it's also a bad term because of that. So I'm going to add in some layers here. Okay. So in my shoulder here, there's these two little things here that are green when I press it. This is the bursa. So this is called the subacromial bursa. This is what we think of often as being inflamed, which leads to impingement. But inflammation of this can also cause pain. Okay. So we have musculature that also has to run through this little hole here. And let me add in some muscles. There's the one we want. So this one I just put in, this is now yellow. This is called the supraspinatus muscle. Okay, so supraspinatus gets impinged underneath this bone here, which is called this is the scapula, but this is the acromion of the scapula. And what's ultimately happening, we don't have enough space. So if this becomes inflamed, there's a space issue here. Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you lift your shoulder, so if I was to lift the humerus up this way, this space gets tighter. That's the easiest way I can think about it. It compresses that space. Okay. Now, what we have here is, this is one case of impingement. We also have this muscle here, infraspinatus, that can also become impinged, especially when we get to overhead. So you can imagine if the arm comes up, this muscle is going to come up and basically get tucked underneath here as well, and can be basically almost pinched off. Okay. So those are the most common impingements. There's one other, and that's bicep impingement. So this is actually where your bicep tendon goes. Now I'm going to add it in here. Okay, so this is the long head of the bicep. There's a short head of the bicep over here. So the long head of the bicep comes in here, and this is a tricky one because it goes actually underneath and deep into the shoulder, basically into the shoulder socket, as it were. So that could also become impinged. Less likely that actually becomes impinged in swimming. The bicep tendon actually gets overworked in swimming when technique is poor. We can talk about that in a little bit, because actually that's my area of injury. Okay, so how do we prevent this from happening? Well, number one is good technique, but more important, at least when in my reading, is good control of the arm, and in particular, good control in two areas. So we basically have two areas that we're really concerned with. Number one area is something called, is scapular stabilization. Okay, so I'm going to once again take the muscles away. So this is our scapula. Okay, when we move our humerus or upper arm, the scapula moves with it. and there is a rhythm. It's called scapulohumeral rhythm. And the rhythm is really, really important. And as we fatigue, so as you swim longer, the rhythm gets out of whack, is the easiest way to put it. Okay. And it's one of the reasons why when people swim, it doesn't hurt until they get to 1500. It doesn't hurt till they get to 2000, because until they become fatigued, they actually have good scapular control. And basically, the more fatigued they get, the less scapular control they have. So we have some muscles that are going to control the scapula. So I'm once again going to add some layers here. So we have the rhomboids. They control the scapula. They basically help pull the scapula towards the spine. And when we lift the scapula up, these are going to be basically elongated, and they're going to basically be controlling the scapula. We have another really, really important muscle that's right under here. And this is called the serratus anterior. This is the one in boxers you see, and it kind of looks like their ribs are sticking out, right? This is such a unique muscle, and well, all muscles are unique, but such an important muscle that I'm actually going to isolate it. Okay, so now this is serratus anterior. You can actually see it goes underneath the scapula and then attaches to the inside of the scapula. This muscle is so important for holding or for maintaining stability in the scapula. So in some of the reading I did, they said that there's two muscles that are active in almost the entire front crawl or freestyle swim. Serratus anterior is one of them, and if it's maybe the most active muscle during the entire swim stroke. So very, very important for maintaining scapular control. And we're going to add one more to that mix if I can get to it. This one's called Subscapularis. Let me isolate this one. So this one's also on the underside of the scapula, and this one attaches to the humerus. And this muscle is also very, very important for scapular control. Another muscle that almost in every phase of swimming, actually in every phase of swimming, it's active. And so if you're fatigued in these two muscles as you go and you start to lose scapular control, that's when we get impingement issues, and we get impingement issues. So I want to show you one other thing with this one. Let me see if I can do it.
And let me throw in that the movement of the scapula is necessary in order to have the range of motion that we see at the shoulder. So you don't see that type of the range of motion at the hip. It's structurally very similar to the shoulder. But we don't have nearly as much range of motion at the hip because the pelvic girdle does not move. But in the case of the shoulder, the scapula does move.
Yeah, and so the key is that the shoulder provides maximum mobility, but limited stability.
Mm-hmm.
The hip is the exact opposite. So with the subscapularis, and and the infraspinatus, and there's another one, teres minor, and actually we'll add supraspinatus. Those four muscles are the rotator cuff. And we always hear people about, oh, I've injured my rotator cuff. So, and normally they've injured supraspinatus. Okay. But ultimately what happens is, and if you can kind of imagine this, is as you lift your arm up over your head, this muscle, so infraspinatus and supraspinatus, plus the one we just talked about, deep underneath their subscapularis, when you lift your arm overhead, their job, and this is so critical, is to pull the head of the humerus down. And that is the most important thing I can tell you, is if you lift this up over your head and the head of the humerus translates upwards, that's where this gets impinged and this gets impinged. So I'm going to reiterate that. If this muscle doesn't do its job, or these two muscles don't do their job, when we lift our hand over our head or arm over our head, this becomes impinged, this becomes impinged, and eventually this will tear.
I think this is great because I think a lot of times people think muscles just cause movement, but in many cases, the role of a muscle is to stabilize
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. So we have muscles that are called stabilizers during movement and neutralizers
Mm-hmm.
that'll actually prevent unwanted movements. There's also ones that just prevent movement or just stabilize a movement. So you're absolutely right. So that being said, we do really need to pay attention to the strength and endurance of these muscles. So, you see people, doing band exercises, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or pulley exercises. When I'm doing an external rotation, so I'll stand up here. So if I'm doing a band and I'm going from
Yeah, wait,
here.
we gotta take you off screen share. Otherwise, you're just.
Yeah, let me do that. Stop share.
Okay.
So if I stand up and I go from here out, that's infraspinatus. So, it's not, honestly, it's not a muscle that's really important for the actual swimming motion, but it's so important that that muscle is strong and robust to keep the head of the humerus down
Mm-hmm.
and prevent that impingement. And then subscapularis, the one that's underneath, that also plays a big role. That's one that you can actually strengthen by coming from here and from here and down. It's probably the best way to do it. It's called the reverse lawnmower. That's probably one of the better ones you could do. And then the third muscle that I think is really, really important, once again, is that Serratus Anterior. And we strengthen that one with something called a push-up plus. So it's like you push up and then you finish with scapular motion. And, so those are really basic, a real basic understanding of a little bit of the anatomy of the injury.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one thing that you'll notice is I didn't mention any of the powerful muscles of swimming.
Right.
Because the thing is those are not the ones that become injured, right? Our lats don't become injured. Our deltoids, for the most part, don't become injured. Our pectoralis major doesn't become injured. Our trapezius muscle doesn't become injured. It's these tiny little muscles. Okay. And they don't become injured for the most part because of lack of strength because of necessarily lack of strength of like the supraspinatus, the one that actually gets impinged. They become injured because basically it's a mechanical fault.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, I mean, it's a long way around to get back to there, but I think that understanding a little bit of the anatomy is potentially important for people.
No, I think that's huge. That's really important because that's what your swim stroke and all the the tips to minimize the risk of injury during swimming lead right back towards shoulder anatomy.
And understanding the muscles that fatigue are these smaller muscles, and the smaller muscles, when they fatigue and lose control, like if your serratus anterior fatigues and your scapula starts to kind of wing a little bit, it's not going to slow you down. Because your power muscles, your lat in particular, it's still going to go. It can go all day, right? But now it's going in a place that is creating injury to other structures. And I think that that's important, So, you see people, for example, in the gym doing like a bunch of lat pull downs. Okay, great. Like you want your lats to be strong. But if you're a swimmer, I think I'd be spending more of my time on the stabilizing muscles than on the muscles that are, I'm already working my lats, when I'm swimming. So we need to look at those stabilizer muscles.
That's great. Yeah. And so let's maybe talk a little technique then.
Yes.
Because now you've gone through the anatomy and how do you move your arm in a way during swimming to minimize the risk of impinging anything.
Yeah. Well, John, I think you're going to allude to it, but the number one thing is not to cross over your body. Right? Because when we do come across, that is actually closing down that space even further.
Yeah.
It's called the subacromial space. That's closing that down. And so even if you were robust in your muscles that stabilize your scapula and depress the head of your humerus, it's not going to really matter.
Right.
Because you're actually putting yourself in a bad position.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's kind of the way I always think about it is like when you're a kid and someone got your arm behind your back and like, hey, I got you, right? And they started to pull, and you're like, oh man, they're really impinging you, is what they're doing, right? And I know we're going to talk about it, but the swim stroke, if done incorrectly, is an impinging thing.
That's right, because now you go in this position.
Yep.
And then you're doing something like this.
Yeah, and if you just hold your hand right there, just like you just did. Okay, so now if we can kind of imagine the skeleton underneath here, right? So what's happening when John does that and he starts pushing his hand down and keeps his elbow up, that shoots the humerus right up into his shoulder, or into his underneath his scapula. So can I annotate on here?
I don't know.
That's a good question. I know on the thing we use at work, we can annotate. Maybe I can't. Because if I could draw on you, that'd be super cool.
I don't know. Can you? Then edit profile health. We'll have to Google that.
Yeah, we'll do that later. But yeah, so yeah. So John, go back to that same position. So what do we call that in when we teach swimming?
Well, okay, so this phase, and this is the problem I have with a lot of swim instruction, is that they look at, discrete moments in time, but your hand is almost always moving. So this phase is the catch phase, but this position you're trying to get to, I like the phrase early vertical forearm. People will use high elbow a lot, and that term ends up being used to mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
It started off high elbow during recovery. That was what was talked about. Then it was high elbow during catch. And what a lot of people interpret that to be is the elbow needs to be close to the surface. But that's not necessarily the case. It's more that you're trying to move the hand almost in before the elbow here. So if you draw a line between here and the hand, the elbow is on the front side of that line. This would be nice if we could annotate on this now.
So, and I think we can annotate, but I think you have to annotate on your own screen.
Oh, really? How do I do it?
So I think if I go, for example, if I go back to share screen, so let's say I go to this, there's a pencil up here, and yeah, I can annotate on my own screen.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but I don't think
I can annotate here too.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, then I guess, how did you do that?
Oh.
So I stopped sharing. A whiteboard. No, that'll be an actual whiteboard. Anyway.
Interesting. Okay, well,
we'll figure it out. Can you annotate on your own screen now?
Not like this. No. I think I need to. Oh, okay. So yeah, there's whiteboard. Okay.
But that's not annotating.
No, you can't see me though.
All right. Well, anyways,
let's play around with it.
Let's keep talking about that.
Okay, so technique. When I was learning to swim, the coaches would always tell us to put our thumb in the water first.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly. And
because it's funny, I only see anatomy.
I'm already, reaching here. So I'm moving my scapula away from the midline of my body. And now I'm internally rotating. I'm taking the front side of my arm, moving it inwards.
Yeah. So you're elongating your supraspinatus and tightening tightening it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So later on, it was probably not until the 90s, I actually was in a swim clinic, and the coach was saying, don't do it this way because of impingement. He said, put your pinky in first.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of times in swimming, to break an old habit, you really got to go to extreme the other way. And so then the whole idea of going to pinky first is it externally rotates the arm a little bit, releases some of that impingement that you're talking about at the shoulder. So something that people can try, especially if they have joint shoulder pain, is putting your hand in the water, check and see where you are. Maybe just try to go to the extreme. My model picture, going pinky first, which makes, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense from a swim perspective, because you got to now turn your hand in. But once your hand enters the water, you're starting to drop it down. And then as you start to turn it in, you're not impinging as much at the shoulder.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good piece of advice. How about, John, what's changed in the technique as far as the crossing over underneath your body?
Well, that going back, I mean, we used to think that we would, pull through like this, but now what I'm seeing is people are saying stay wider and not hit that midline. Back when I was swimming in college, I remember there was a lot of talk like you grab a rope and you pull yourself along the rope. So you're always trying to work on that midline. And now I think it's more going out wide, not getting too wide, but going out wide and then coming back down in.
Yeah. So there's also another piece of impingement, and that's not having enough body roll.
Yeah, right.
So that's another piece. So if you stay wide like that and you don't roll, then you can there's also a mechanism there for impingement. And I think that having good correct body roll is important. And then there's also impingements with too much body roll.
Yeah.
So getting body roll correct is important, I think, as well.
Well, and what's important about that is that's where the kick, I think, really comes back to help triathletes. And your kick is not separate from your upper body. It's a little bit of a dance that has to happen there. And that kick, although it doesn't need to help with propulsion so much, it does need to help you with that body roll. And that's, I think, one of the tricks that triathletes can figure out is how to kick. Sorry, I should have said when to kick. And when to kick in order to allow for that body to roll back and forth. You don't need a lot of click. And a lot of times when we are wearing a wetsuit, you don't need much propulsion from the lower extremity at all. Your wetsuit is really reducing any resistance forces. It's holding your lower body up higher. So you really have some good mechanical benefit to wearing a wetsuit. And then your kick really just ends up being timing to help you roll from one side to the other.
Yeah, for sure. So there's two other areas that I've recently come across and that are more, helping me, is that another area of impingement is pushing too hard in the early pre-catch.
Yeah.
In the glide, right? So it's getting into the glide and then starting really hard up high. And I personally been really working on taking it down and then hitting it hard.
Yep. Slow, fast.
Yeah, slow to fast.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of adult on-swim swimmers, especially ones that are frustrated, want to go hard the entire swim cycle. And they don't understand. I know I didn't that concept of you get into the good position of the catch and then you go hard. And honestly, it took me a long time to figure that out.
Well, no, that's spot. I mean, when you're in this early catch right here, you're mostly just trying to get your hand in a position so that you have a good amount of power that you can generate later in the stroke. And it is, you're still pushing on the water and you're dropping your hand in the water through the catch and trying to get to that early vertical forearm. And then here is where you're actually going to see a lot of the force and the power that you're going to be able to generate to move yourself forward. But slow in the beginning, fast near the end.
Yeah. And then the one other area that, you know, I was going to kind of pick your brain on, because actually I think I actually, once again, done a ton of reading trying to figure out my shoulder problems. And I actually think my problem comes from the late catch or the late phase of in the water. So, and my understanding always was that you want to finish with a nice elbow extension, like almost that when you finish, before your hand leaves the water, your elbow is all the way extended. And that was an error on my part. So, and what I mean by that is, so if I'm here and I come through here, I was always taught to do this.
Right.
And so then if I'm, and my problem was I was coming here like this, then my recovery was like up like this.
Yeah, right.
That's where I was getting to push anterior shoulder because I was extending. That took my bicep in full extension. Then I did this, takes my bicep further in full extension.
Yeah.
So I want to leave the water with my elbow slightly bent for my recovery. And I don't know where I learned that I needed to push hard and extend. It's probably some podcast somewhere. But I can definitely feel a lot less anterior pain and bicep tendon pain.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the coaching techniques I've had is the hand should just come out naturally. It just pops out of the water, as opposed to forcibly leaving it. Now, if you're sprinting, different things. We're talking distance swimming, where you're trying to cover a long distance and go for a long swim. So, but now that does, come into the recovery of the stroke, where you bring your hand back out into the front. Again, this is back in the days, we would just be, trying to have that high elbow in the recovery. Yep. And there's some great drills where you try to drag your thumb up your side, and then
I've done them all.
Yeah, no, you have to get the right body roll to be able to do that type of drill. And I think there's a lot of value in doing that type of drill. But once we put a wetsuit on, and even in a lot of the swim strokes now, people are finding that you don't need to do that high elbow recovery as much. And especially with the wetsuit, I mean, the neoprene isn't that resistant to movement, but it does add resistance to movement. And we've been trying to quantify how much resistance that is. It does depend on the type of neoprene you're using. And if you are buying an expensive wetsuit, you probably have a more flexible neoprene in the shoulder versus anywhere else, the Yamamoto type of neoprene. And so there is a difference between a $500 wetsuit and a $100 wetsuit. And it's likely the flexibility that you're going to see in this shoulder region. But, and I'm also messing around with measuring force during swimming.
Yes.
Now, I can actually get video concurrently with this. And then I can look at where the force is peaking relative to my swim stroke. So I'm actually pretty excited about trying to get that. I do need someone else to go. Maybe we put these on you.
Yeah, I video myself a lot, actually. That's one of the things in reinventing my swim stroke. I'm trying to video myself every Saturday.
You're trying to do what?
Video myself swimming every Saturday.
Okay. Yeah.
And see the errors I'm making, make the corrections during the week, and then video it again. And sometimes it doesn't change.
It's hard to change any of our movements. It's hard to change the way you run. It's hard to change the way you bike. It's really hard to change the way you swim, because you can't see yourself. Unless you videotape or you put a mirror on the bottom of the pool or something like that. But hard to see anything in real time even.
Well, I think the other thing that with swimming and in any of these things is you cannot multi-focus.
Yeah.
Right. You can only think of one thing at a time. I'm a strong believer of that. Hey, hold your head like this and do this with your elbow and do this and kick at the same time. And no, you can't. So, and I actually think that's why where swim drills are somewhat important is finding the right drill for the right thing.
Yeah.
Those can reinforce, like the position reinforces good technique rather than you just thinking about many things at the same time. But yeah, I think video is really important for swimming.
Yeah.
More so than running and biking for sure.
Your video, are you doing that underwater or on the surface?
Yeah, I have a GoPro. I put it on the bottom of the pool, a little tripod.
Yeah, good.
Swim 100 and then take it out and then get home, look at it, yell at myself a little bit.
No, you're spot on. It's one thing at a time. And, back in the days when I coached swimming, it was okay, this is what we're going to focus on for this set, one thing, and then you focus on something else. And all the toys that we have available to us in the pool, I mean, those are important, but you got to use them the right way, and you got to know what you're using them for. And fins are, I think, incredibly important, not to swim faster, but so that you can figure out when your kick should happen relative to your stroke in order to allow for that natural body roll.
Well, I think fins are also important, at least in my reading, for decreasing the stress on the shoulder. So one of the things that they were saying in some of their articles was you should almost always warm up swimming with fins.
Yeah.
Because it actually is a way to slowly engage your shoulder rather than just jumping in and swimming. And if you don't have fins, even a pull buoy will decrease stress on your shoulder.
Yeah.
But I mean, John, right now I'm swimming at least half of my swim with fins for that purpose, but also for the purpose of trying to keep and get better ankle mobility.
Yeah.
We weren't talking about ankles today, but it's kind of a double benefit.
No, that's great. And I would also say, you mentioned pull buoy, which is excellent. The buoyancy shorts.
Oh yeah.
Using that as a tool, again, because eventually you're going to be swimming in a wetsuit, most likely. I mean, 90% of our races.
I don't call them buoyancy shorts. That's just what I swim in.
Yeah, right.
It's not a tool because I get nothing underneath.
Oh,
I'm just swimming.
There you go. That's great. But the neat thing about buoyancy shorts is it does do that same thing. It lifts you up so that you're not worrying about the legs dropping. And so it's really important to practice that position. And I think it's important not to swim with them too, Ted.
Only if I forget. And chances are I'll be naked then, so they won't let me in. The truth is that I pretty much always swim in buoyancy shorts. And, it is a crutch, but I'm going to 90% of my races are wetsuit races. And the ones that aren't, I put a swim skin on and I don't even really notice it. I don't really notice the difference because my body's now kind of used to that position.
Right.
But and they keep you a little bit warmer.
Well, and I do, they do. It's pretty funny how that is. But I have gotten away from using devices because I got addicted to them. And it was just, I always wanted to swim with swim paddles. I love the swim paddles. Swim paddles and pull buoys. So I actually only use my tools on Sunday swim. Yeah. Okay. So, but that's where I'm at with my swimming.
I look at tools for swimming. They serve a purpose. I mean, if you know what you're doing with them, they serve a purpose. But I kind of look at with cycling, right? You got a different bike. That's a different tool.
Yeah.
Right. You get your indoor setup. That's a little different tool. We're just stressing the system in different ways.
Yeah.
But and I don't know, can you become addicted to swimming with paddles?
Oh yeah, I did.
Or do you just get really strong?
Yeah. But the paddles, okay, so if you do use paddles, this is where I really had some big improvements in my stroke. Is I was using paddles, and back in the day, you put a strap on your finger. I think we had one on the thumb, and then we had one over the wrist. Okay, so we had 3 straps on our paddles. This is back in the 80s now. Well, one time my paddle, the wrist strap and the thumb strap both had broken. I'm like, well, I still got to do this. I still want to use my paddles. And it helped me so much because it helped me. And you're talking about bringing the hand out of the water. If you don't have that wrist strap on the pull paddle, and you try to bring your hand out early, the paddle's just going to wreak havoc on you.
Yep.
And so it actually ends up being a really good way to practice getting your hand out of the water where you're not, it's effortless.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I like I said, I think there is a role for all of these things. But there's danger to all these things, you
Yeah.
know. So swimming with paddles can put more stress on your shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
especially in that early phase we're talking about. Like if you push too hard down to begin with, I think the paddles can be a problem. Snorkel, I love swimming with a snorkel. I think
Yeah.
it's really good, but same thing. If you were to go from not swimming with a snorkel to like, I'm gonna fix my swim stroke. I'm gonna swim with a snorkel, and you do a couple thousand with a snorkel. Guess what's gonna happen? You're
Mm-hmm.
gonna get injured.
Yeah. Right.
Right? We cannot make huge changes.
Mm-mm.
It's funny. Like some of the swim coaches I've worked with, oh, try this, and then you try it, and you're like, oh man, that's tough. That makes me a little bit sore. Oh, that's how you know you're doing it right. Okay,
Right.
good. But you cannot do 2,000 yards like that or 3,000 yards
That's
like
right.
that because your body is not robust enough
Mm-hmm.
for that. It's funny, in running, for example, if I change your shoe and instead of a 4 millimeter drop or an 8 millimeter drop, I change it to a 4 millimeter drop, that could be an injury.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And we're talking about a few millimeters.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In swimming, we're talking about changing from here to here, right? Like huge amounts of variability. And so I will tell people, like, if you're going to change your stroke, try and do a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say I'm going to change my stroke and then, oh man, it feels good, I'm going to go do 4,000. You are going to be sore, and you
Yeah.
might.
Yeah. And I think your point before of warming up
Oh,
just is huge in swimming. So I think that is
I'm still the only person in my swim group that spends 10 minutes with their bands
yeah.
every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't know why I'm the only one.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that's injured though. So maybe I'm the one,
There you go.
you know.
All right. So another big tip that I think everyone should know how to breathe on both sides. And
Yep.
it is because you do put stress on your arms differently depending on which side you're breathing on. So it does make sense to be able to breathe on both sides. Now, breathing pattern is different than being able to breathe on both sides. So my breathing pattern during the workout, I swim breathing on one side, looking at one scenery. I flip, I come back, and I swim breathing on the other side, looking at the same scenery. So that's just how I'm breathing that stroke on that side every time, uh, and then just switching the sides. So, but during an open water swim, then you get into alternating, uh, possibly more in more frequently than what I do during swimming.
I'm going to share a little anecdote with you.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with a triathlete, and they want to know about. We were talking about double-sided power meters or single-sided, and they were convinced they needed a double-sided power meter because what if I have got a little bit of imbalance? And I'm like, okay, slow down. You only breathe to one side, and you're not willing to change that.
Yeah, interesting.
So
Yeah,
is this if you're so concerned about imbalances on the bike,
yeah, right.
what about the imbalances in the water?
And it's probably so small.
It's probably 1%, right? But the imbalances that's being created in the water are huge. So just kind of keep everything in perspective. And John, honestly, like I spend 90% of my time breathing to the right. I can breathe to the left, and I probably should do it more.
Mm-hmm. Switch every length.
Yeah, it's just something that it's hard. Like
It is hard.
when you feel you're addicted almost, right? When you feel comfortable to one side.
Yep.
And then I do some bilateral breathing and
Yep.
from time to time. But you're right. Like I should do more of swimming to the opposite side.
Yeah. Well, and I did a lot of single arm swimming, trying to teach myself how to have similar stroke on both sides, and you still don't. It's never the same, but it will help you overall. And what I find is, especially during open water, I know if I'm coming in near the end, I can switch sides and have maybe a little bit of a boost in terms of my stroke, because that side may not be as tired at that point. So
interesting.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really good advice. Yeah, for sure.
All right. So you swimming this weekend? Yeah, you're swimming tomorrow.
Swim tomorrow morning. Yep.
How far?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of basically I'm doing a sprint race tomorrow.
Yep.
But I just can't go and swim 500 or 750. So I was just thinking about what I might do is go doing like a nice long warm up, and do like a 500 for time.
Okay.
And then get out, drive to where I'm going to start the bike, and I don't know. We'll see. We'll see my shoulder.
I'll swim in the afternoon. I got to go run an errand anyhow. So
you're going old school triathlon.
That's right. Reverse. That's
the reverse.
Yeah.
I like it. So what time you guys are gonna head out?
Laura's going, so we'll be watching temperature.
Okay, good. So hopefully I'll see you out there.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun. Thanks for setting it up. No, looking forward to getting out there and seeing see if we can build up a little bit of a sweat.
All right. Okay, well, have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks. You too. Enjoy.
Okay, bye-bye.